Clarisse LaRue is the bully that we all love to hate in the Percy Jackson series, but as time goes on, we come to respect her and love her. In this video, I'm going to break down Clarisse's entire timeline from the original Percy Jackson series, the Demigod Files, the Heroes of Olympus series, and explain what we find out about her character in the Trials of Apollo series. Before we start, I want to make it absolutely clear that this video is based on the books, not the movies. There are many differences. Also, there are going to be spoilers, so there's your warning. Now, let's get the video started. Clarisse LaRue was born to the Greek god Ares, the god of war, and a mortal woman whom the god of war had relations with, whose last name was LaRue, where Clarisse got her last name. She lived in Arizona as a kid, where she lived with her mother. Growing up, however, Clarisse did not know what she was. She had no idea that she was a half-blood. She had a lot of anger and rage, and oftentimes turned to violence, common traits of Ares' children. And one day, this caught the attention of a satyr who was on the hunt for half-bloods to bring to Camp Half-Blood. When Gleason Hedge found Clarisse, he told her what she was and convinced her to come with him across the country. Coming to Camp Half-Blood changed Clarisse's life. She became a year-rounder, meaning she never left the camp even when summer ended. She quickly became known as the bully at Camp Half-Blood. She was very well trained, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on whose side she's on. Clarisse was eventually made the head counselor of Cabin 5, or the Ares Cabin. She was well respected by her brothers and sisters in Cabin 5, and though she was a bully to every other cabin, most respected her solely based on how passionate she was about the camp and protecting it. Clarisse eventually met her father, and Ares gifted her an electric spear, which quickly became her favorite weapon. One day, Clarisse and the other year-rounders, Luke, Annabeth, and a few others went on a field trip to Olympus, where they saw the Olympian gods have their big annual council. And unknown to Clarisse at the time, Luke stole Zeus's lightning bolt and Hades' helm of darkness, and eventually her father Ares would become involved in the scheme as well. Clarisse had a crush on a boy named Chris Rodriguez, a son of Hermes, but she never acted on her feelings, at least not yet. When new camper Percy Jackson arrived at camp, his entrance was graced by him defeating a minotaur. Because of this, there was talk that he could be a child of the big three that the Great Prophecy referred to. This was something that sort of threatened Clarisse, as she was the biggest and baddest person in the camp. So when he arrived, she confronted him and Annabeth, who was giving him a tour. After saying she was going to pulverize Annabeth and capture the flag, something that she clearly wasn't too sure of as her eye twitched as she said this, she then turned to Percy and called him a runt, and when he responded saying that she smelled bad, the two squared up to fight. Clarisse easily beat Percy as soon as he made his first move, showing off just how skilled she was in combat. She dragged Percy to the bathroom, laughing as she did so, saying that he was not big three material. As she was about to dunk Percy's head in the toilet though, she ate her words as she was shot by water from the toilet so hard she was launched backwards. When she got up, Clarisse looked at Percy and told him that he was dead. And when Percy shot back, her friends had to hold her back and dragged her back to their cabin. She got over it fast though, because later she sat at the Ares table laughing and belching alongside her friends. Over time, as Percy trained, Clarisse would pulverize him, especially on the wrestling mat. When it came time for Capture the Flag, Clarisse and her friends ambushed Percy as Clarisse yelled, "Cream the punk." Clarisse used the electric spear that her father had given her, knocking Percy down. However, when Percy fell in the water, his senses awoke, and when Clarisse charged at him, Percy broke her spear like a twig. As she angrily screamed at him, he hit her between the eyes with the butt of his sword, sending her flying backwards. The game was then won as Luke got the flag, meaning Clarisse and her cabin mates lost. She shouted again, saying that it was a trick, and Percy was the distraction. Clarisse came out of this game being defeated by Percy, again, having her favorite weapon be destroyed, and losing the game, and obviously she's pretty upset about it. That night, Percy was claimed by Poseidon, one of the big three, confirming everyone's suspicions, and like everybody else, Clarisse kept her distance from him, but she still gave him venomous looks that made it clear she wanted to kill him for breaking her magic spear. Not long after that, Clarisse was furious when Percy got a quest, as she had spent years hoping to get one for herself. During his quest, Percy fought and defeated Clarisse's father Ares, and when he returned, Clarisse and her cabin mates did not join in on the celebrations. They instead gave him poisonous looks as if they'd never forgive him for disgracing their dad. At the end of the summer, Clarisse stayed at camp as she always did, as she was a year-rounder. Clarisse was in for quite a shock when Chris Rodriguez, the boy she had a crush on, joined Luke and Kronos. She still had feelings for him, but she knew she had to let him go. When it got closer to the next summer, Clarisse saw their defenses fail thanks to someone poisoning the pine tree that acted as a shield for them. This led to Chiron being blamed, and he was replaced by Tantalus as Chiron was fired. This also meant that without the tree to protect them, Clarisse had to organize border patrol, and one day they had to spring into action when two fire-breathing mechanical bulls attacked the camp. When Percy, Annabeth, and the Cyclops Tyson arrived at camp, Clarisse's armor was charred, and she was fighting with a broken spear shaft, the other end being embedded uselessly in the bull's shoulder. Clarisse did everything she could to lead her soldiers, but they were outmatched. Even so, Percy thought to himself that Clarisse was very brave in that moment. When one of the bulls closed in on Clarisse for the kill, Percy pushed her out of the way, saving her life, but she immediately told him to let go and said, "Curse you." After going back out to fight, Clarisse impaled one of the bulls through the back leg with her spear, finally taking it down, and Tyson took the other one down. Afterwards, Clarisse yelled at Percy, saying that he ruined everything and that she had it under control, and she then told Percy not to save her life ever again. However, she immediately became distracted when some of her soldiers were injured, and she ran off to help them without a second thought. Clarisse cares a lot about her soldiers and those that fight for her, and this is a clear indication of that. She seemingly forgot about everything. The only thing on her mind were those that fought for her are hurt. It shows that she's not just a great warrior because she can fight in combat. It shows that she's a great warrior because she never leaves a man behind and cares about her friends and allies. After the fight, Clarisse had one arm in a sling and a nasty looking gash on her cheek, but other than that, the encounter with the bulls didn't seem to faze her. When Tantalus said that he was reinstating chariot races, Clarisse stood up, went against the popular opinion, and said that they had to keep the border patrol going, as she was worried everyone else would focus on the chariot races instead of safety. Tantalus shut her down though and said that they did not need it. Even so, Clarisse went behind his back and kept the border patrol going, as she cared deeply about the camp's safety. Clarisse still participated in the chariot races though, and when it came time for the race, she climbed aboard the blood-red chariot pulled by horse skeletons, and she was armed with javelins, spiked balls, and a bunch of other nasty weapons. During the race, thousands of vicious pigeons swarmed and dive-bombed both the riders and the spectators. Clarisse ignored them though and kept going on with the race even when everybody else stopped. She crossed the finish line completely unopposed, and only then did she realize how serious the bird problem was. When she saw Percy and Annabeth leaving, she asked them why they were running because the fight was here. She drew her sword and charged the stands to fight off the birds. Percy and Annabeth ended up saving the day when both of them came back though, but Tantalus ended up awarding a stunned Clarisse the victory in the race and punished Percy and Annabeth. Tantalus went even further, ordering a special luncheon banquet to celebrate Clarisse's victory, and then gave Clarisse the quest to find the Golden Fleece in the Sea of Monsters and save Grover, a quest that clearly should have gone to Percy and Annabeth, who came up with the Golden Fleece idea to save the pine tree and with it, the camp. As the Ares cabin chanted her name, Clarisse stood up looking stunned, but then swallowed and swelled with pride, saying that she would accept the quest. However, Percy ruined this moment for her, saying that he should go, and Clarisse glared at him as her cabin mate said that he had his chance last summer. Clarisse shut Percy down, making it clear that this was her quest. Clarisse went before the Oracle, as all campers do before their quest, and the Oracle spoke, saying, "You shall sail the iron ship with warriors of bone. You shall find what you seek and make it your own, but despair for your life entombed with stone, and fall without friends to fly home alone." Clarisse was allowed to bring two other half-bloods with her, but no one from her cabin wanted to go. Clarisse of course played this off though, saying that she was letting them stay behind to protect the camp. However, deep down, she knew this was bad because of the last line in the prophecy that said, "Fail without friends." Clarisse went on her quest, and after praying to her father for a naval transport just like the prophecy said, he gifted her just that, including dead sailors who owed tribute to Ares for losing in battle. It was filled with dark rooms, a coal bunker, cannons, and Clarisse's favorite part, the gunnery deck. While on her quest, Clarisse found Percy, Tyson, and Annabeth fighting a Hydra, and when she pulled up to them in the CSS Birmingham, she ordered her crew to fire at will. They hit the Hydra right on, making it explode right in front of all of them. Afterwards, Clarisse pulled up to them, called them losers, said that she had to rescue them, and told them to come aboard. When Annabeth told Clarisse that Luke was after the fleece as well, Clarisse said good, because she would blow him out of the water too. Annabeth then said that they had to combine their forces, and Clarisse got furious. She said that this was her quest, and she finally got to be the hero, and she would not let them steal that from her. While on the ship, Clarisse was talking to her father's shimmering image, and he was furious with her. He told her that he did not want excuses, called her a little girl, and told her that she did not want to see him mad. When she responded, he made fun of her, mimicking what she said, and then told her that she was pathetic. He then said that he knew he should have let one of his sons take this quest instead of Clarisse, but she immediately said that she would succeed and said that she would make him proud. Ares told her that she better and said that if she let Percy steal the glory from her, he would be furious. Clarisse then tried to mention what the Oracle said about needing friends to complete the quest, but Ares said that he didn't care what it said, and he threatened to beat her if she didn't succeed, something that made Clarisse flinch even though he wasn't really in front of her. While going through the Sea of Monsters, Clarisse got separated from the others, and an explosion blew up the CSS Birmingham. Clarisse thought that everybody else was dead, and she made her way to the island of Polyphemus to get the fleece. However, Polyphemus captured her and tied her up in his cave over a pot of boiling water. She challenged the Cyclops to a fight, but all he did was say that she had spunk. Clarisse then saw Grover, and she exposed to Polyphemus that Grover was not a Cyclops, but a satyr that he could eat. Polyphemus then decided to marry Clarisse instead, much to her horror. The Cyclops then left and locked the two of them in the cave, making the third part of the prophecy come true, but despair for your life entombed within stone. Luckily, Percy and Annabeth came to their rescue, but when Polyphemus got Annabeth, Clarisse and Grover stood by Percy ready to fight. Clarisse finally accepted their help, which she of course needed to succeed according to the prophecy, and she said that they'd take him together. Eventually, with the help of Tyson, they took the Cyclops down. Clarisse carried an injured Annabeth like a sack of flour and lugged her down through the beach into their ship. However, when they were in the water, Clarisse stupidly taunted the blind Cyclops, and he was able to tell where they were based on the sound of her voice. He threw a boulder that ended up destroying and sinking their ship. Clarisse and the others were pulled down by the boat, and though she was a strong swimmer, it was no use. Luckily, Percy and Tyson called hippocampi who rescued all of them. They rode the hippocampi, and when they got to Miami, Clarisse and Annabeth began to fight, Clarisse saying that it was Percy's fault they wouldn't get back in time to heal the tree with the fleece. However, Percy told them both to stop. He then saw all of this from Clarisse's point of view, her quest taken over by others, making her look bad, then of course letting her father down after he threatened her and told her that she better not fail. This made Percy ask Clarisse the prophecy, and hearing the last line, he came up with a plan to give Clarisse the glory. He gave her all the money that they had to buy a plane ticket, and Clarisse took the golden fleece back to camp just in time to save the tree. This also ensured that Luke did not get the fleece either, as he showed up moments after Clarisse left. When Clarisse arrived, she draped the golden fleece over the tree, and she brought it back to life. Clarisse was then carried on her cabin mate's shoulders, where she was honored with a laurel wreath and a lot of celebrating. She later went up to Percy and told him that just because he was cool one time did not mean he was off the hook with Ares, and she told him that she was just waiting for the right opportunity to pulverize him. After the quest was over, they did another chariot race, and this time Clarisse lost to Percy and Annabeth. As always, when the summer ended, Clarisse stayed at camp, but this time she was given a top secret mission by Chiron to investigate the Labyrinth. She was in the maze for a long time, and while in there, she had some close calls as it was very dangerous. She eventually found Chris Rodriguez, the boy Clarisse had a crush on before he joined Luke and Kronos. Chris had gone insane while stuck in the labyrinth, courtesy of King Minos' ghost. He appeared close to Clarisse's mother's house, and when she found him, he was in a desert in Arizona where it was 120 degrees, and he was in full Greek armor and muttering about string. Clarisse brought him back to her mom's house, ensuring that the mortals would not institutionalize him. She tried to nurse him back to health, and Chiron even came out and interviewed him, but it didn't do any good. The only thing they got out of him was that Luke's men, including himself, were exploring the labyrinth. Clarisse tried to destroy the entrance to the labyrinth in Arizona, demolishing a whole building with a wrecking ball, but the maze entrance just shifted a few feet away. When Clarisse got back from this mission, Percy knew that the quest must have been difficult because she did not even try to pulverize him. She also had a new scar on her chin, and her hair had been cut short and ragged, like someone had attacked it with a pair of safety scissors. During a meeting with the head counselors and a few others, she reported the bad news from her mission that Luke was trying to get into Camp Half-Blood through the Labyrinth using Ariadne's string to guide them. While everyone else was away, Clarisse and Annabeth began to spend more time together, and they actually became friends. The two got even closer as they worked together on figuring out the maze of tunnels in the Labyrinth. At the start of the next summer, Clarisse was at Grover's hearing, and when the Council of Cloven Elders punished Grover, his girlfriend Juniper tried to charge at the old satyrs, but Clarisse along with Annabeth held her back, Clarisse telling her that it was the wrong fight and said to wait. During a game of Capture the Flag, Clarisse won, but even while wearing the golden laurels, she did not brag. She was too worried about Annabeth and Percy who went missing. Clarisse was the one to find them, and she realized that they had fallen into the labyrinth. When she realized this, she gasped, finally finding the thing that she had been searching for. The thing that Luke had been searching for. How to get into camp through the maze. Clarisse led a war briefing about this alongside Annabeth, realizing that the only way to stop Luke from using the entrance into camp was to defeat him in the maze. Clarisse said that there was only one person who should lead this quest, and that was Annabeth. Annabeth said that Clarisse had done just as much as her though, and said that she should go too, but Clarisse declined, saying that she was not going back in there. Travis Stoll laughed and made fun of her, asking if she was scared, and Clarisse stood up and said in a shaky and uncharacteristic voice that he didn't understand anything, and she stormed out. As she left, Chiron said that she had had a difficult year. Clarisse went down to the basement of the big house where Chris was being held. As Chris cried, Clarisse told him it was okay, but Chris was hallucinating and said that Clarisse was a woman named Mary. He told her to get away, but Clarisse told him in a very sad voice that she wasn't Mary. She told him that her name was Clarisse and basically begged him to remember. As Chris started to talk nonsense, Clarisse pleaded with him close to tears and said that he had to get better and that Mr. D, the only person who could heal him, would be back soon. As time went on though, no matter what she did, he just got worse and worse, which broke Clarisse's heart. Eventually, he got so bad and so physically weak that he had to be moved to the infirmary. Chiron had to order Clarisse to go back to her regular schedule because she would just sit at Chris's bedside constantly. Chris no longer responded to anything. He would not eat or drink, and none of the medicines they gave him helped. Chiron said that he was simply losing the will to live. When everyone thought that Percy had died while in the labyrinth, Clarisse attended a ceremony for his death, but Percy then showed up during it, and she merely rolled her eyes like she couldn't believe he'd had the nerve to survive. Not long after he returned, Percy and Clarisse had a talk in the arena. Percy said he was sorry about Chris, and she responded saying that sometimes things go wrong. Her voice then got shaky as she said heroes sometimes die. Percy thought to himself that even though Chris had turned on the camp and joined Luke and Kronos, Clarisse still thought of Chris as a hero. This really shows how much growth Clarisse's character has gone through over the past few books. She truly cares about Chris, and she looks past his demons. While in the arena, Clarisse told Percy to do her a favor, saying that if he finds Daedalus, the man that created the labyrinth, to kill him. When Kronos' army came out of the labyrinth and into Camp Half-Blood, Clarisse led the Ares cabin to protect their home. She fought hard and was a big reason why the camp defeated the army and sent them back in the maze running. Afterwards, Mr. D returned, and he cured Chris of his madness. After the fight, Clarisse was seen sitting shoulder to shoulder with Chris, who was telling a joke, and everyone at camp noticed that Clarisse's happiness was at an all-time high. When it got darker, Clarisse and Chris snuck off and held hands as they sang campfire songs, and though they thought no one could see them, Percy did, and it put a smile on his face. Now we get to a great story that actually adds so much to Clarisse's character, and it actually wasn't in the main 5 books. It was actually in something called the Demigod Files. Clarisse was given the task, which was more of a test from her father, of looking after her father's chariot for the day, but her divine half-brothers Phobos and Deimos stole it. While trying to get it back, she was attacked in an alley by a flock of giant blackbirds, courtesy of her half-brothers. The birds cut her up pretty badly, but nevertheless, she fought them off with her sword, and when Percy came out to join the battle, as he was in school right next to the alley, they joined forces, and together they defeated all of the birds. They both took ambrosia to heal their wounds, and Clarisse said goodbye to Percy, but he did not want to leave, as he could tell something was wrong. Clarisse opened up to Percy and told her everything that was going on with her divine half-brothers. When Percy said he would help her, she asked why he would do that because they weren't friends. But before he could answer, they were interrupted by Phobos, who said Clarisse had been crying in a mocking voice. Clarisse drew her sword and charged, but her brother disappeared just as she got to him, and he reappeared far away from her. Phobos then gave Clarisse the illusion that bugs were overtaking her, and he made her suffer with this until Percy demanded him to stop. Before leaving, Phobos gave them a hint about where the chariot was, saying it was across the water. After this, Clarisse finally accepted Percy's help, a big step for the two of them who had been sworn enemies for so long. Eventually, Clarisse and Percy were met by Deimos, who had summoned a sea serpent. Clarisse trusted Percy as he said to grab on, and together they leaped into the bay. Clarisse jumped off of Percy and tackled her brother while Percy took down the serpent. As the siblings were wrestling underwater though, Deimos disappeared. Percy rushed to Clarisse's side when she came to the surface, and he pushed both of them to land. The two eventually found the chariot, but when Clarisse approached, her brothers appeared in the chariot and they went after Percy. Clarisse jumped on Deimos, knocking him off the chariot, and the two fought with their swords. Deimos eventually got the best of her though when he turned into Ares. Clarisse went down to her knees, and Deimos, disguised as their father, said that she had failed him. Percy showed up and tried to tell her it was an illusion, but he realized he could not help her. This was her absolute worst fear, and she had to overcome it by herself. Percy looked at her, locked eyes, and told her to stand up to him, and Clarisse did just that. She stood, and when he told her to kneel, she said no. She then raised her sword, said that she was tired of being scared of him, and when he struck, she deflected it with ease and stabbed him in the shoulder. Before disappearing, Deimos took his true godly form, and Percy ensured that Clarisse did not look right at him, which in turn saved her life, as that might have killed her. Percy, knowing that Clarisse had to get the chariot back before sundown, used his powers to allow the chariot to go through the water. Percy said it was one of the hardest things he had ever done, but they got there just in time. Before Percy left, he congratulated Clarisse on passing the test her father had given her. Percy also agreed not to tell anyone about her greatest fear of standing up to her father. Clarisse began to say thank you, which was very rare for her, but before she got the words out, Percy spared her and said, "Don't mention it." Percy then told Clarisse his biggest fear, which was watching his friends suffer as Camp Half-Blood burned. As Percy started to walk away, Clarisse called after him and asked if she had been one of the friends in the vision, and Percy said that she was one of them. This made Clarisse smile, and the two said goodbye to each other. And that's the end of the Demigod Files story, and now we're moving on to The Last Olympian, the last book in the first series. Clarisse got a new electric spear after Percy had broken the other one she had in the first book, and the new spear was called Maimer, but behind her back, everybody called it Lamer. The Ares cabin, led by Clarisse, and the Apollo cabin all went on a raid in Philadelphia where some of Luke's demigods were. There was a big battle, and the Apollo cabin seized a flying chariot while the Ares cabin led the raid. They won the battle, but the Ares cabin and the Apollo cabin fought over who got the flying chariot. Clarisse was furious, as they had done all the dirty work, and this led to her giving all of the Apollo cabin the silent treatment for 3 days. Silena Beauregard, a fellow camper and head counselor, gave Clarisse advice about her new boyfriend Chris, and ever since then, the two had the strangest friendship. Clarisse had decided to make herself Silena's personal bodyguard, and later, Clarisse comforted her new friend when Silena's boyfriend Beckendorf had been killed. Clarisse's relationship with Silena again shows how much growth her character has gone through. Just like Chris, she truly cares about Silena and she's opening herself up. When it came time for a war council meeting, Clarisse got into an argument with Michael Yu from the Apollo cabin about the chariot. Chiron ended up siding with Michael Yu, and Clarisse was furious, saying that she and her brothers and sisters were used by the camp, always being expected to show up and fight when they needed them, but then never getting anything for themselves or anything in return. Clarisse apologized to Silena for yelling in front of her, then told the rest of the head counselors that they could fight without the Ares cabin unless she got what she wanted, told them to have fun dying, and stormed out. Clarisse continued to support Silena after Beckendorf's death, and one night, she and her boyfriend Chris comforted a crying Silena. When Percy approached, he told Silena how much Beckendorf loved her, and this made her cry more. Clarisse glared at Percy, but Silena said it was alright. She then said that she had to go, and Clarisse asked if she wanted company, but she just ran off. Clarisse then said that Silena was stronger than she looked and said that she would survive, more to herself than anybody else. Percy told Clarisse that she could help Silena by fighting in honor of Beckendorf and rejoin them for the big fight that was coming up, but she said it wasn't her problem. She said that if their cabin didn't get the honor they deserved, then she wouldn't fight. Percy then said that she owed him for saving her life in that cave in the Sea of Monsters, and Clarisse said that she would do any other favor, but not this. Percy then got mad, asked if she was going to let Kronos crush them, and called Clarisse a big baby. This made her charge at Percy, but Chris held her back. Chris then sided with Percy, saying that he had a point, and she said, "Not you too," and she ran off despite Chris shouting after her. Michael Yu eventually realized that it was not worth fighting over, so he gave the flying chariot to Clarisse in the Ares cabin, but she said it was too late, as they had insulted her honor for the last time. When the final fight against Kronos arrived, everybody but the Ares cabin showed up to battle. Chris tried to reason with Clarisse, but she said she and the Ares cabin were going to guard the camp, and Chris decided to stay with her. In the middle of the battle, Silena decided to go back to camp and convince Clarisse to join the fight, but instead, she stole Clarisse's armor and spear, and she led the Ares cabin into battle, all of them thinking she was Clarisse. She fought bravely for a while, but eventually she charged the Draken, and the monster nailed her with poison directly in her face. Clarisse and Chris then arrived, and Clarisse shouted with grief. When the Draken came for Chris, she glared at it, her face filled with absolute hate. She grabbed her spear from Silena and fought the beast. She threw her spear into its eyes with so much force that it shattered the shaft. The hit took the Draken down, and it fell defeated. Clarisse ran back to Silena and asked her what she was thinking. She yelled at her siblings for following Silena, but Silena said not to blame them. She told Clarisse they wanted to believe it was you, and Clarisse began to cry. Silena then admitted that she was the spy at camp working for Luke and Kronos. Silena asked Clarisse to forgive her before she died, but Clarisse told her that she wasn't dying. Moments later though, Silena passed on. Clarisse held her and wept while Chris put a hand on her shoulder. Clarisse then turned to everyone and said sternly that she was a hero despite her being a spy, and asked if everybody understood. Just as she looks past Chris's wrongdoing, she's doing the exact same thing for Silena and looking past her wrongdoings. She's learned to see the good in people, which is a huge step forward because she would always see the bad in people, and that's why she was a bully. Percy agreed with Clarisse, saying that Silena died a hero, and he then told her to come and fight. Clarisse immediately said that Kronos was going to pay. Without her armor or spear, Clarisse stepped up and did her job of driving the enemy away from the Empire State Building, the entrance to Olympus. She rode her chariot straight into the Titan's army and crushed everything in her path. She was so inspiring that everyone on their side rallied behind her, and eventually the monsters retreated. She then dragged the Draken's dead body behind the chariot and charged after the enemy, and as she did this, she was literally glowing, an aura of red fire flickering around her. She had gotten the blessing of Ares, and she was invincible. The enemy threw spears and shot arrows, but nothing hit her. She then shouted, "I am Clarisse, Draken Slayer." She began to mock Kronos, calling him a coward, but Percy told her to withdraw. She instead circled 5th Avenue, daring anyone to cross her path as she dragged the dead Draken, allowing everybody else to tend to the wounded. Chris watched over her as she did this, and promised Percy that he would bring her inside when she was ready. As the battle raged on and Percy and Annabeth went to Olympus, Clarisse fought with everything she had, and she succeeded for a long time, longer than anyone else in her position would have. However, they were quickly outnumbered, and she lost the fight against the Hyperborean giant, and she and her chariot were frozen in a block of ice. Nevertheless, Clarisse's fellow campers, allies, and friends came through and won the fight. After the battle was over, Clarisse and the other heroes went before their parents in Olympus, and when Clarisse entered, still shivering from her time in the ice block, Ares bellowed, "That's my girl." The god of war ruffled her hair and pounded her on the back, calling her the best warrior he'd ever seen. She looked pretty overwhelmed, but eventually she began to smile. Later on, when they got back to camp, Clarisse and the other campers eavesdropped on Percy and Annabeth's first kiss, and afterwards, Clarisse led the way as they all hoisted the two of them on their shoulders, and she said gleefully that the lovebirds needed to cool off. Clarisse and the others then dumped the happy couple into the water. And now we get to the Heroes of Olympus series. Clarisse became pretty worried when Percy went missing for several months, and one day, 3 demigod children named Piper, Jason, and Leo showed up to Camp Half-Blood with Annabeth. They went on a quest, and during that quest, Jason got a lot of his memory back, and he remembered where he came from, the Roman equivalent to Camp Half-Blood called Camp Jupiter. During a war council meeting, Clarisse was skeptical, as she was sure they would have heard of them, but Piper told her that the gods had kept the two groups apart because in the past, they always killed each other, and Clarisse said that she could respect that. But she then asked why they hadn't crossed paths while on quests, and Chiron said that they actually had many times, and every time they did, it was a tragedy. Because of this, if they do cross paths, the gods clean their memories of those involved. When they were told that the Romans were more warlike, several Camp Half-Blood campers looked uncomfortable, but Clarisse merely shrugged as if it sounded okay to her. The war meeting ended with them deciding to take a warship called the Argo II to Camp Jupiter, but Clarisse did not like this plan, as the warship would make them think they were attacking, but the others said they didn't really have a choice. Gleason Hedge, the satyr that brought Clarisse to Camp Half-Blood, had a pregnant wife named Melly at camp, but he was on a quest with Percy and the others. Clarisse decided to step up and take care of her and protect her. Another example of how caring Clarisse has become over time. When it became clear that there was going to be an attack at Camp Half-Blood, courtesy of Camp Jupiter, Clarisse stepped up and prepared the campers for the coming attack. She yelled orders at campers, forming them into lines, and preparing all of them for what was to come. She had been training the campers for months in preparation for this. She wasn't too happy with her friend Annabeth though, as Annabeth had told them to trust a Roman praetor named Rhena to bring the statue of Athena to them, but even though she did not trust the Romans, she put her trust in her friend and allowed it. During another war meeting, Chiron was reviewing their defenses, and Clarisse stepped forward and said that their defenses were mostly solid, and the campers were ready to fight. She then said that the Romans, who she called the barbarians, had them cut off completely in 3 different directions, and Rachel Dare corrected her, saying that they were not barbarians, but Romans. Clarisse turned on her though, and said that their allies were more than just Romans, as they had all sorts of monsters on their side, something that made Clarisse furious. She then snapped at Rachel, who was the oracle who could see the future, and she said it would have been nice if Rachel had foreseen these monsters when they needed her most, but Rachel of course couldn't because she had lost her oracle powers. Will Salas then stepped forward and placed his hand gently on Clarisse's wrist, something that not many campers could have done without getting stabbed, but he got Clarisse to calm down and lower her dagger. She got heated again though when she pounded on the table and said that they needed to attack the Romans now, as they were getting more reinforcements every day. She mentioned that they were aware of the Romans' invasion date on August 1st, and she asked why they were letting them set the timetable. She then said that she had Hedge's pregnant wife under her protection, and said that she was not going to let anything happen to her, as she owed Hedge her life for bringing her to Camp Half-Blood. She then mentioned her distrust of the Roman praetor Rhena, but she was shut down when it was mentioned that Annabeth sent them those directions while in freaking Tartarus, and Clarisse dropped it. When it got closer to the battle, Clarisse was wiping Melly with a cool cloth and told her that everything would be fine, though Clarisse sounded a little worried. When it was time to fight, they gave the Roman named Octavian one more chance, but Clarisse ended up riding up Half-Blood Hill with the entire Greek army behind her. 100 demigods fanned out around her with twice that many satyrs and nature spirits. Clarisse told the Romans that they had fired on their camp and said that they would now be destroyed. The Greeks and Romans eventually made peace, however, just as Annabeth had planned. Everything was now peaceful. After the battle was over, Clarisse was delighted when Hedge and Melly had their baby, and she was even more delighted when they named Clarisse their baby's godmother. Anytime the family went anywhere, Clarisse trailed along behind them, making it her job to be the family's bodyguard, telling everyone to give the kid some space. After yet another victory in a huge war, Clarisse decided to step down from her position as head counselor of the Ares cabin, and for the first time in years, she left her home at Camp Half-Blood to go back home where her mother was, and she attended the University of Arizona to get a good education. Clarisse started out as the bully at Camp Half-Blood, but she grew to be so much more to so many people. A sister, a daughter, a friend, and even a godmother. She also discovered that impressing her dad wasn't as important as she thought. What was really important was being herself, and that's exactly what she did. She put her bullying ways behind her and tore down her walls enough to make friends with Percy and Annabeth, who had been her enemies for years. She was now not only an amazing warrior, but an amazing person with an amazingly big heart. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm just here to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed to the left. If you want to be featured on the next video, plus get a bunch of other things like previews and behind the scenes, become a patron today. Also, you can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life, like my cute dog Loki. I also do some fun stuff on TikTok and Twitter that I think you guys would really enjoy if you enjoy what I do here on this channel. As always, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great Movie Flame videos on the way.